It all started with a sound that no one on Earth had ever heard before. Late one night, inside a quiet observatory in Chile, a young scientist named Dr. Ria Khan was studying deep space radio waves when she noticed something unusual. The signal repeating again and again, soft at first, then growing stronger each hour. It was not random, not natural, and definitely not human. It carried rhythm, pauses, and a strange sadness hidden inside the tone. Ria felt a chill as she listened to the translated pattern. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a code for war. It was a plea. A cry for peace from somewhere far beyond the stars. Within hours, news spread like wildfire. Every government, military, and space agency on Earth turned their eyes to the sky. People around the world gathered around screens and radios waiting for answers. The message was decoded again and again until the truth became clear. It came from a race calling themselves the Varelians. They were a peaceful and advanced civilization, living on a planet called Valora Prime, several light-years away. Their message said they were under attack by a brutal empire known as the Drakor Dominion. The Varelians begged for help, not for conquest, not for wealth, but for survival. Their words carried fear, hope, and trust that someone out there would listen. For the first time in human history, Earth had proof of intelligent life beyond itself. People cried, cheered, and prayed. Some were terrified. Some were overjoyed. But all of humanity understood one thing. Something massive had changed forever. The United Nations Space Command formed an emergency council that night. Scientists, generals, and world leaders filled a single digital room, faces serious and pale. The message kept repeating, "We seek peace. We seek refuge. Please respond," but no one knew what to do. Should they answer? Should humanity involve itself in an alien war? Or should Earth stay silent, pretending the message never came? The fear of the unknown hung heavy in the air. Many leaders warned that helping could bring danger to Earth. If the Drakor were as powerful as the message described, then humanity might face destruction before it even reached the stars. Others argued that Earth had a duty, a moral responsibility to help those asking for mercy. After all, if the positions were reversed, wouldn't humans hope someone out there would help them? In the following days, public opinion became divided. Some called the Varelians a hoax, a trap designed to lure humans into a galactic conflict. Others believed the message was real, and that ignoring it would mean letting innocent lives perish. Everywhere on news broadcasts, in classrooms, and across the internet, people debated the same question. Should humanity answer the call? Meanwhile, scientists studied every detail of the signal. They discovered fragments of the Varelian language, maps of their solar system, and distress beacons that showed the enemy's attacks growing closer each day. The Varelians described how their cities were burning, how their ships were being destroyed, and how their children were being evacuated underground. They didn't ask for weapons or soldiers. They asked for a chance to live in peace. Among the experts studying the transmissions was Colonel James Walker, a retired space engineer and veteran known for his calm voice and logical mind. He sat quietly as others argued around him. Finally, he said something that silenced the room. "If they're asking for peace," he said, "then someone out there has to protect it. Maybe it's time humanity decided what kind of species it really wants to be." That question haunted everyone who heard it. Humanity had fought endless wars, struggled through centuries of chaos, and barely learned to live in unity. Yet now, when the universe called for help, could it really turn away? The world's eyes looked upward, and a strange realization began to grow. Humans might not be the most powerful species, but they were survivors. Earth was a dangerous world filled with storms, predators, and challenges that had shaped humans into tough, adaptive beings. Compared to many alien planets, Earth was considered a death world, a place where only the strongest could thrive. And that toughness, that instinct to endure, was something no alien civilization had ever seen. As scientists continued decoding the Varelians' message, they learned about their culture. The Varelians were tall, elegant beings with shimmering blue skin and luminous eyes. Their society valued peace, art, and knowledge. They had never experienced war until the Drakor came. The Drakor were everything they weren't: ruthless, power-hungry, and brutal. They conquered worlds with no mercy. The Varelians' weapons were weak against them. Their technology, though advanced, was never built for destruction. In their final recordings, one Varelian leader's trembling voice said, "If there is anyone listening, please, help us. We do not wish to die." The message reached deep into the hearts of people on Earth. Artists painted the plea in colors of sorrow and hope. Poets wrote verses about unseen friends among the stars. Children asked their parents if the aliens would be safe now. Slowly, humanity's fear began to change into something else: determination. One night, after days of silence and uncertainty, the United Nations sent the first reply. It was short, simple, and filled with humanity's spirit. We hear you. You are not alone. That single message echoed across space, traveling toward Valora Prime at light speed. The world waited for an answer. When the reply finally came, it was faint but clear. The Varelians sent a message of relief and gratitude. They believed peace could still be saved. For the first time, they smiled again. But their joy was short-lived. Their next transmission showed dark shadows moving across their skies, Drakor warships. The Varelian signal turned chaotic, filled with screams, explosions, and static. The last words before the transmission cut off were, "They've found us." Earth fell into silence. No one spoke for several seconds after the broadcast ended. Then quietly, Colonel Walker stood and said, "Now we know what peace costs." He turned to the council. "The question is, will we pay it?" That night, the world seemed to stop spinning. People couldn't sleep. The Varelians' last message replayed on every screen, haunting the hearts of millions. Some said it was fate that brought the two species together. Others said it was destiny that humans heard the call for help. But deep down, everyone knew something important. This was more than a distant war. This was a test of humanity's soul. For centuries, humans had dreamed of meeting alien life. Some imagined peace, others imagined invasion, but no one expected the first real contact to come as a desperate plea for help. Now, standing on the edge of a new age, humanity had to decide what kind of legacy it would leave behind. Would it be remembered as a world that ignored the suffering of others, or as the one that stood up when peace itself was dying? In small villages and giant cities, in quiet rooms and crowded halls, people whispered the same words. They asked us for peace. It became more than a sentence. It became a question to the entire species. Could humanity, a race born from chaos and struggle, become the protectors of peace for others? Far above the planet, satellites continued to monitor space. The signal from Valora Prime grew weaker, fading like a dying heartbeat. Yet even as it disappeared, it left behind a spark, a promise that humanity would not forget. Somewhere in the depths of the galaxy, an innocent world was burning, and somewhere on Earth, the Deathworlders were about to rise. Fear spread through every corner of the world after the last broken message from the Varelians. The images of their burning cities and falling ships had been seen by millions of people. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if space itself was mourning. Governments across Earth called emergency meetings. Scientists, generals, and world leaders gathered in secret to decide what to do next. Everyone understood the truth. If the Drakor Dominion could destroy a peaceful, advanced race like the Varelians, then no planet was truly safe. The United Nations Space Command had already begun building the first interstellar communication base, but it wasn't enough. They needed to decide whether to take action or stay hidden. Many leaders argued that humanity was not ready for a war in the stars. They said Earth had just started to recover from its own divisions, climate disasters, wars, and decades of rebuilding. To send soldiers into space against an alien empire seemed like madness. "We are not their saviors," one politician said during a live broadcast. "We barely survived our own battles," but others disagreed. Among them was Colonel James Walker, the man who had studied the first alien transmission. He stood before the council and spoke calmly, his voice firm. "If the Drakor destroyed the Varelians," he said, "then they will come again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will not stop. Every tyrant, every conqueror spreads until someone fights back. We've learned that on our own world." His words echoed across the room. For a long time, no one spoke. Outside the walls of politics and power, people were already forming opinions of their own. Across the internet, millions of citizens from every nation joined together in online movements. Artists painted murals of the Varelians' last stand. Soldiers volunteered for missions that didn't even exist yet. Space engineers proposed plans to modify old starship designs for defense purposes. Humanity, divided for centuries, was now strangely united by fear, and by something deeper, something almost noble. News stations replayed Colonel Walker's speech again and again. He had reminded everyone of something they had almost forgotten. Humanity's strength wasn't in technology or numbers, but in spirit. Humans were survivors of the harshest planet known to intelligent life. Earth was full of deadly creatures, violent storms, earthquakes, diseases, and endless danger. Humanity had evolved not through peace but through struggle. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth was called a death world, a place where everything fought to live. And humans, born from that chaos, had learned to adapt faster than any other species could. Scientists began to study this strange fact. They compared human biology to what little data they had from the Virelians. Humans had stronger immune systems, faster healing, and higher aggression when threatened. Their minds were unpredictable. They could switch from calm to furious in a heartbeat. They could survive environments that would kill most life. To the Virelians, peace was natural. To humans, peace had to be earned. That difference changed everything. As global discussions continued, tension filled the air. Some feared that answering the call would bring the Drakor's wrath to Earth. Others believed that if humanity didn't act now, they would regret it forever. For the first time, religion, science, and philosophy all seemed to agree on one point. Earth could not ignore the suffering of others. While the debates continued, reports began to surface. Strange signals were detected on the edges of the solar system, energy bursts, perhaps scouting probes. Nobody could confirm it, but the possibility that the Drakor were already watching Earth made every nation nervous. Suddenly, silence didn't seem like safety anymore. It felt like waiting for doom. The turning point came one morning when a small group of astronauts from different countries released a message to the world. They stood together in front of a camera, wearing their old mission suits. "If the Virelians can ask for help," one of them said, "then we can give it. We've seen our planet survive worse. Maybe it's time to show the stars who we really are." Their message went viral in less than an hour. People cheered, cried, and filled social media with a single phrase, "We will answer." Under growing public pressure, the United Nations Space Command voted. By a narrow margin, Earth would respond, not with surrender or silence, but with preparation. A new task force would be formed, uniting the best scientists, soldiers, and pilots from every nation. They called it Project Horizon. Its goal was to build a fleet capable of reaching the Virelian system. Not for invasion, but for defense. Not for conquest, but for peace through strength. Factories around the world shifted production overnight. Old military bases were reopened. Spaceports lit up again with rockets carrying supplies into orbit. Every nation contributed something: metal, energy, manpower, or knowledge. For the first time in history, the entire planet was working toward one shared purpose. People began calling the volunteers Deathworlders, not as an insult but as a title of respect. It meant they were children of Earth, born from the deadliest planet in the known galaxy, ready to face whatever came. Colonel Walker was chosen to lead Project Horizon. Under his guidance, humanity began training a new kind of soldier. These were not ordinary fighters. They were explorers, engineers, medics, and strategists. Humans who understood both science and survival. They studied alien physiology, adapted weapons to work in zero gravity, and designed armor capable of withstanding extreme conditions. The training was brutal, pushing every recruit to their limit. Many failed. Those who didn't became something stronger, fearless, focused, and prepared for the unknown. At the same time, scientists worked day and night on spacecraft design. Using fragments of technology recovered from old probes, they developed faster engines, stronger shields, and hybrid power systems. The first human warship capable of interstellar travel was named Horizon 1. It was massive, sleek, and built with a single purpose: to protect. When it was finally unveiled, people around the world watched live as it rose from the launch pad, glowing like a rising sun. But not everyone felt hope. Some feared that humanity was becoming the very thing it promised to fight. Peace groups protested, saying that responding with weapons only continued a cycle of violence. They argued that true peace came from understanding, not war. Colonel Walker answered them in a rare interview. "You can't reason with those who destroy for pleasure," he said quietly. "Sometimes peace must be protected by those who know what it costs." Days turned into weeks, and Project Horizon grew stronger. The first fleet of ships was nearly ready. Communication satellites were aligned to re-establish contact with Valora Prime. Every night, people looked up at the sky, wondering if the Virelians were still alive. The last message they had sent was still replayed in classrooms and news reports, the trembling voice asking for peace. In the middle of all this, something unexpected happened. A new signal was detected, faint but familiar. It was Varelian. The scientists immediately began decoding it. Hours later, the message appeared on every major broadcast. It wasn't just a plea anymore, it was a warning. The Drakor are coming, it said. They know about you. Prepare yourselves. That message changed everything. There was no more debate, no more hesitation. The Drakor already knew humanity existed. The choice was no longer whether to fight, it was when. And in that moment, humanity's fear transformed into something fierce. All across the world, people stopped seeing themselves as separate nations. There were no Americans or Chinese, no Russians or Africans, only humans. They called themselves Deathworlders with pride. From the cold mountains of Alaska to the crowded streets of Tokyo, the same thought echoed in every heart. The Varelians had asked for peace. And now the Deathworlders would answer, not as saviors, but as equals. As the ships prepared to leave orbit, Colonel Walker stood on the command bridge of Horizon 1 and looked out at the stars. His voice came through every radio channel on Earth. "This isn't just their fight," he said. "It's ours. We don't fight because we love war. We fight because peace deserves a chance to live." And with that, the engines of the first human fleet roared to life. The blue glow of thrusters lit up the darkness of space as the Deathworlders began their journey beyond the stars. Humanity had made its choice. The peaceful cries of the Varelians had awakened something ancient and unbreakable, the human will to survive, to protect, and to fight for peace when no one else could. The day the Deathworlders left Earth was unlike any other in human history. Cities across the planet stood still as the first fleet prepared to rise into the sky. People filled streets and rooftops watching the huge ships shimmer in the early light. Children waved flags, families cried, and soldiers saluted the sky. For once, humanity wasn't divided by borders or beliefs. Everyone everywhere shared one emotion, pride. They were sending their own kind into the stars not to conquer, but to protect. They were answering the Varelians' call. Colonel James Walker stood on the bridge of Horizon 1, the flagship of the Deathworlder fleet. Around him were men and women trained for one purpose, to defend peace where no one else could. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Some were scientists, some engineers, some former astronauts, and a few even came from ordinary jobs, teachers, doctors, and rescue workers. Every one of them carried the same determination. They knew what they were risking, and none of them planned to turn back. The fleet lifted off with thunder and fire, leaving blue trails across the sky. For a moment it looked like sunrise had come early. Millions of people on Earth watched in silence as the ships became tiny points of light and vanished into the stars. From that moment on, the Deathworlders belonged to the universe. The journey was long and dangerous. Even with new technology, crossing interstellar space was no simple task. The Varelian coordinates showed a path filled with debris fields, asteroid clusters, and radiation belts. But to the Deathworlders, danger was nothing new. They had survived earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, and wars. Compared to Earth's wild nature, space was just another challenge to overcome. As the ships traveled deeper, strange things began to happen. Unknown signals flickered across communication screens. Sometimes shadows appeared on scanners, massive shapes that disappeared when approached. The crew grew tense, but Walker stayed calm. "If someone's watching us," he said, "let them see who we are." His words became a quiet chant repeated among the soldiers whenever fear crept in. Weeks passed before they finally reached the Varelian system. What they saw broke their hearts. The once beautiful planet of Valora Prime was surrounded by floating wreckage. Broken satellites, destroyed ships, and burning fragments orbited like ghosts. Below, the planet's surface was scarred with fire. Entire continents were blackened. From space, the Deathworlders could see massive craters glowing like embers in the dark. The Varelians had not lied. The Drakor Dominion had left nothing untouched. The fleet orbited carefully, scanning for survivors. For hours, there was only static until a faint signal appeared. It was weak, but it was there. A group of Varelians had survived underground, hiding beneath the ruins of their once great cities. When they finally connected, the voice of a Varelian leader, soft and trembling, came through. "You came," she said. "We thought we were alone." Walker smiled faintly. Not anymore. The rescue began immediately. Small landing ships descended through the smoky atmosphere, dodging the remains of enemy drones still floating in the sky. When the first Deathworlders stepped onto Valora Prime, the air was thick with dust and the smell of burning metal. Buildings leaned at strange angles, their once bright towers now piles of shattered crystal. The surviving Varelians looked fragile, thin, and terrified. But when they saw humans in their armor, carrying supplies and medical kits instead of weapons, they fell to their knees in relief. One of the Varelian children reached out and touched the hand of a human medic. The child's skin shimmered like blue glass against the dull metal of the soldier's glove. "You came to fight the Drakor?" the child asked in a trembling voice. The medic smiled softly. "We came to fight for you, but peace didn't last long." Within days, sensors picked up movement in the outer system. A Drakor scouting fleet was approaching. The Deathworlders had little time to prepare. They quickly set up defense shields, repaired what weapons they could find, and moved the Varelians deeper underground. Walker called the crew together. "We don't know their full strength," he said, "but we know ours. We've fought worse on our own soil. We adapt, we endure. We fight smart." When the Drakor ships entered orbit, the stars lit up with explosions. The enemy's fleet was massive, sleek black ships with red energy cores that burned like lava. They opened fire immediately, destroying several human drones in seconds. But the Deathworlders didn't fight in the same way as other species. Where the Drakor relied on power and intimidation, humans relied on chaos. They used decoys, false signals, and unpredictable maneuvers that confused the enemy. They turned space itself into a trap. One human pilot, Lieutenant Arya Patel, led a squadron straight into a Drakor formation, pretending to retreat, then suddenly turned and attacked from below, where the enemy shields were weakest. It was a move no Drakor commander had ever seen before. "They're insane," one Drakor officer hissed as human ships darted through his fleet like hunting wolves. "They fight like predators," he was right. They fought like creatures born on a planet where survival was everything. The first major battle lasted for hours. The Drakor had superior weapons, but the Deathworlders refused to back down. Even damaged ships stayed in the fight. When one vessel lost power, its crew rammed it straight into an enemy cruiser, sacrificing themselves to destroy it. The Drakor were shocked. No species they had ever fought before was willing to die this way. Not for victory, but for protection. They realized too late that humans didn't see this as war. To them, it was survival, and survival was something they understood better than anyone. Back on the surface, Varelians listened in awe as reports of the battle echoed through the underground shelters. For centuries, they had believed peace was maintained through diplomacy and kindness, but now they saw a different kind of peace, one protected by courage and sacrifice. A young Varelian scientist whispered, "They fight not because they love war, but because they love life." Her words spread among the survivors like a spark of hope. When the battle ended, the Drakor retreated temporarily, leaving wreckage floating in orbit. The Deathworlders had won their first victory, but it had come at a heavy cost. Many ships were destroyed and countless soldiers were lost. On the bridge of Horizon 1, Walker stood silently, staring at the stars. He felt the weight of every life taken, both human and alien. "We didn't come here to kill," he said quietly. "But peace sometimes demands blood." Despite their exhaustion, the Deathworlders didn't stop. They began rebuilding, turning the remains of Drakor ships into weapons and tools. Engineers worked beside Varelian scientists, combining human creativity with alien technology. Within weeks, they had built a makeshift defense network around the planet. The Varelians watched in amazement as humans transformed destruction into strength. To them, it was like watching nature itself, life finding a way no matter what. One evening, as the twin moons of Valora rose over the ruins, Colonel Walker met with the Varelian leader, Ilaria. Her luminous eyes shimmered in the dim light. "We thought we knew peace," she said softly. "But we were wrong. Peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the courage to stand when others fall." Walker nodded slowly. "On Earth," he said, "peace was never given to us. We had to fight for it every time." News of the human victory began to spread. Other species across the galaxy, once too afraid to resist the Drakor, started to take notice. They saw something terrifying and beautiful, a species from a deadly world standing up to an empire that had crushed countless civilizations. The whispers began. The Deathworlders have come. To some, it was a warning. To others, it was hope. For the first time in galactic history, the Drakor had been pushed back, not by a superpower, not by an ancient race, but by newcomers from a wild, unpredictable planet called Earth. The balance of the galaxy had shifted. Humanity's reputation was no longer unknown. They were not just explorers or peacekeepers. They were survivors, protectors, and warriors born from chaos. As the fleet prepared for the next battle, Walker looked out at the endless stars and thought of the people back home. The ones who had built these ships, the families watching from Earth, and the children who believed in peace. "We're not just fighting for them," he murmured. "We're fighting for everyone who ever asked for peace and got silence instead." The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence after the first victory did not last long. The Drakor Dominion was not used to losing. For centuries, they had crushed every race that resisted them, spreading their rule across countless star systems. Losing to a young, unknown species like the humans was an insult they could not tolerate. Within days, their fleets began to gather again, larger, stronger, and more ruthless. They were coming to finish what they started, and this time they would show no mercy. On Valora Prime, the Deathworlders knew what was coming. Colonel Walker stood before a large holographic display showing hundreds of enemy ships moving toward them. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. Around him, his officers worked nonstop, checking weapons, reinforcing shields, and preparing evacuation plans for the remaining Varelians. Everyone knew the next battle would decide everything: the survival of both species or their complete destruction. The Varelian survivors were terrified. They had never seen such power. But when they looked at the humans, they saw no fear. They saw focus. The Deathworlders were not shaken. They were used to fighting against impossible odds. For them, fear was just another part of the battle. As Walker once told his crew, "We don't run from storms. We learn how to fight inside them." The first Drakor ships entered orbit, dark and massive, like shadows swallowing the stars. Then came the second wave and the third. The sky above Valora Prime was filled with red energy lights, each representing a ship armed with devastating weapons. The Drakor commander sent one simple message across the system: "Surrender or burn." Walker looked at the message for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Send them this reply," he said to his communication officer. "Tell them Earth doesn't surrender." When the battle began, it was chaos. The Drakor opened fire with plasma cannons that burned holes through the atmosphere. Explosions lit up the sky like lightning. The Deathworlders fought back with everything they had: missiles, drones, railguns, and energy bursts. The sound of battle echoed through the planet, shaking mountains and lighting the night. But this time, the Drakor had numbers. Dozens of human ships were destroyed within the first hour. Fire and debris rained down from the sky. The Varelians watched in horror as their saviors fought desperately above them. The ground shook with every impact. Yet even as ships fell, the humans refused to retreat. They adapted quickly, changing tactics mid-battle, using every trick and instinct they had learned from centuries of surviving chaos. One of the key Deathworlder captains, Arya Patel, led her squadron straight through the center of the Drakor formation. Her voice came through the comms: "They think we'll run. Let's show them what Earth taught us." Her fighters moved like streaks of light, diving between enemy fire, hitting weak points the Drakor didn't even know they had. Her squadron destroyed 3 massive warships before being surrounded. Her last message before her ship exploded was calm and fearless: "Keep fighting. Don't let them take the sky." Those words spread through the fleet like fire. Every Deathworlder heard them. Every pilot, every gunner, every soldier found new strength. They fought harder, faster, more unpredictably than any alien fleet ever had. The Drakor commanders began to panic. Their systems couldn't predict human maneuvers. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors, wild and brilliant. On the ground, the Varelians joined the fight in small ways. They used their remaining technology to create holographic decoys that confused Drakor targeting systems. Engineers worked beside humans, building makeshift defenses out of scrap metal and broken machines. For the first time, the peaceful race that once only pleaded for help now stood side by side with warriors, learning the meaning of courage. But the Drakor still had the advantage. They unleashed a massive orbital strike. Columns of fire fell from the sky, destroying entire sections of the human defense grid. Cities that had survived the first invasion were reduced to ash. The humans fought on, but they were being pushed back. On Horizon 1, alarms screamed as systems failed one after another. The bridge shook violently as a blast hit their main reactor. Walker grabbed onto a railing, shouting orders through the chaos. Divert power to shields. Protect the evacuation ships. Sparks flew around him. Smoke filled the air. One of his officers turned to him, face pale. "Sir, if we stay here, we'll be destroyed." Walker looked at the map, showing thousands of Varelians still waiting to be evacuated. "Then we stay," he said simply. "They asked for peace. We're going to give it to them." As the Drakor fleet closed in, the humans made a desperate decision. They launched their remaining fighters directly at the enemy ships, not to escape, but to get close enough for boarding. It was madness. No one had ever attempted hand-to-hand combat in space. But the Deathworlders were not like anyone else. Small human teams smashed through enemy hulls, wearing reinforced suits carrying makeshift weapons. Inside the Drakor ships, they fought room by room, corridor by corridor. The Drakor soldiers, massive and armored, roared in fury as the humans charged in. The fighting was brutal, close, and merciless. Humans used whatever they could: blades, tools, even broken machinery. One soldier shouted over the comms, laughing through the blood and smoke, "Welcome to our world!" The Drakor, for the first time in history, were afraid. These creatures from a death world did not fight like prey. They fought like predators. The tide began to turn. With every ship the Deathworlders captured, they used it against the enemy. They hacked into Drakor systems, turning their weapons on each other. Explosions filled space as the once invincible fleet began to crumble. The Varelians, watching from below, couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly destroyed, yet they were winning. Not because of technology, but because of will. Hours turned into days. The battle raged on and neither side would surrender. When the main Drakor flagship appeared, larger than any other ship ever built, Horizon 1 faced it head-on. Walker gave one final order. "All remaining ships form up. This ends now." The human fleet, damaged and burning, pulled together for one last charge. The Drakor flagship opened fire with everything it had, tearing through shields and armor. Horizon 1 shook violently, warning lights flashing everywhere. "Sir, we can't hold much longer," a crew member shouted. Walker's voice stayed steady. "Then let's make it count." He ordered the ship's engines to full power and set a collision course with the Drakor flagship. Everyone on board knew what it meant. There was no escape, but no one hesitated. "For Earth," someone whispered. "For peace," another answered. The ship roared forward, engines blazing brighter than ever. The impact was like a second sun igniting in the darkness. The explosion tore through the Drakor flagship, splitting it apart. The shockwave destroyed dozens of surrounding ships. The remaining Deathworlder vessels, inspired by the sacrifice of Horizon 1, attacked with renewed fury. In the chaos, the Drakor command structure collapsed. Their fleet scattered and fled. The impossible had happened. The humans had won. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was silent. The sky above Valora Prime glowed with burning wreckage. The surviving Deathworlders floated in orbit, their ships battered but standing. The Drakor were gone. On the planet below, the Varelians emerged from their shelters, staring at the sky in disbelief. Peace had been bought, but at a terrible price. In the ruins of Horizon 1's debris field, a beacon still blinked weakly. It carried Colonel Walker's final message, recorded moments before impact. "If you hear this, we fought for peace not because we hated war, but because someone had to. Take care of each other. Don't forget what we stood for." The Varelians found that message and kept it as their most sacred memory. They built a monument on the very spot where the first Deathworlders landed. It stood tall under the twin moons, glowing softly in the night. The inscription was simple. "They came from the world of death and taught us how to live." The story of that war spread across the stars. Every species, even those who had once feared humans, now spoke their name with respect. The Deathworlders had done what no one else dared to do. They had stood against the strongest empire in the galaxy, and won. And though countless lives were lost, the peace they created that day became the foundation of a new era. The galaxy would never again see humanity as weak or primitive. From that moment on, everyone knew the truth. The Deathworlders were not just survivors of a harsh planet. They were the guardians of peace in a violent universe. Years passed after the Great Battle, but the memory of that day never faded. The scars on Valora Prime were still visible from orbit, vast craters, burnt forests, and shattered cities. Yet amid the ruins, life was returning. The Varelians had rebuilt their homes not as they were before, but stronger, wiser, and filled with a new kind of courage they had learned from the humans. They no longer lived in fear. They had seen the strength of those who came from the world of death, and they had learned that peace could not exist without the will to protect it. The story of the Deathworlders spread far beyond the Varelian system. Across the galaxy, whispers turned into legends. Every civilization knew the tale of the humans, creatures from a dangerous wild planet called Earth, who had faced an empire and refused to bow. The name Deathworlders became a title of respect and awe. Some feared them, but many admired them. Even among the Drakor, who had once ruled with terror, there were voices that spoke of the humans with a strange mix of fear and respect. The war had changed everything. For the Varelians, peace was now something sacred. They built memorials for every human who had fallen, placing their names in shining silver under the twin moons. The largest monument was for Colonel Walker and his crew, who had sacrificed themselves on the Horizon 1. At its base, the Varelians inscribed his final words: "Take care of each other. Don't forget what we stood for." Those words became the heart of their new world. Every school, every council, every gathering began with them. The humans who survived the war stayed on Valora Prime for many years. They helped rebuild the planet, taught the Varelians about defense, medicine, and survival. They built gardens where cities had once burned and helped the Varelians grow crops that could survive harsh conditions. The humans didn't see themselves as conquerors or saviors. They saw themselves as equals, friends who shared the same dream of peace. But Earth still called to them. One day, the surviving fleet received a signal, a message from home. It was short, filled with static, but the meaning was clear. Earth stands with you. Return if you can. For the humans, it was a message of hope. Many had thought Earth lost or silent after the war began. Now they knew their home had survived. A group of ships prepared to leave Valora Prime, carrying messages of friendship, promises of alliance, and the stories of everything they had lived through. Before they departed, a great ceremony was held in the rebuilt capital of Valora. The Varelian leader, Elder Saren, stood before the humans. His voice trembled as he spoke. "When our people cried for peace, we expected mercy. What we received was something greater. You gave us strength. You showed us that peace must be protected even if it costs everything. The Deathworlders will always be part of our history and our hearts." Colonel Walker's second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Hayes, accepted a crystal tablet engraved with the names of every fallen soldier. She said softly, "We didn't come here to be heroes. We came because no one else would. If peace survives here, then their sacrifice meant something." She looked up at the sky, where the stars shimmered like the souls of those they had lost. The humans departed, their ships rising slowly into the air. The Varelians watched in silence as the fleet disappeared into the distance. Some wept, others saluted. They knew they might never see their human friends again. But they also knew that their bond would never fade. From that day, every Varelian child was taught about Earth, the distant, dangerous world where life itself was a battle, and where people learned to face fear instead of running from it. Years later, Valora Prime flourished. Its skies were clear, its oceans alive again. The people had learned to live in balance with nature, to defend themselves without losing compassion. Trade routes opened with other peaceful civilizations, and soon the planet became a center of unity for all species who wanted to escape war. They called it the Haven of Peace. Yet somewhere in the stars, the legacy of the Deathworlders continued. Humanity had changed too. Their victory against the Drakor had united them in ways never seen before. Earth was no longer divided by borders or nations. The people of Earth saw themselves as protectors of peace, not just for their planet, but for the galaxy. They formed a new alliance, the Interstellar Peace Coalition, inviting any species that sought freedom and balance to join. The first member to sign was Valora Prime. The coalition sent envoys to dozens of worlds, carrying the story of the humans and the Varelians. They didn't use weapons to win trust. They used understanding, compassion, and proof that even the strongest could choose kindness. For the first time in history, the galaxy began to change, not through conquest, but through cooperation. But peace was never easy to maintain. The shadow of the Drakor still lingered. Some parts of their empire remained hidden, gathering strength. Rumors spoke of a new leader rising among them, one who wanted revenge for their defeat. Yet when spies reported seeing Deathworlder ships in nearby systems, the Drakor hesitated. They remembered the burning wrecks of their fleet, the fearless faces of human soldiers, and the name Horizon 1. Fear held them back more effectively than any weapon. On the anniversary of the final battle, the Varelians gathered around the monument once again. Thousands of glowing orbs floated into the sky, carrying messages of gratitude written by children who had never known war. Among the crowd, old veterans stood silently watching the lights fade into the night. One of them, an elderly human engineer named Ben Carter, smiled softly. "They said humans were monsters once," he murmured. "Now look, they sing our names under the stars." The Varelians had even written a song about the Deathworlders. It was a slow, haunting melody that spoke of courage, sacrifice, and friendship. The chorus translated to, "They came from fire but brought the rain. They walked through death and gave us life again." Whenever it played, even the toughest warriors felt tears in their eyes. It reminded everyone that the greatest heroes were not those who sought glory, but those who gave everything for others. As generations passed, stories became legends, and legends became myths. Some said Colonel Walker's spirit still watched over the stars. Others believed Horizon 1 had not been completely destroyed, that parts of it still drifted silently through space, carrying echoes of its final message. Explorers claimed to have heard faint radio signals, distorted voices repeating, "For peace, for peace." No one could prove it, but people liked to believe it was true. Centuries later, humans and Varelians continued to explore the stars together. They built massive stations, colonized new worlds, and helped guide younger civilizations toward peace. The term Deathworlder changed meaning over time. It no longer described something terrifying. It meant protector, guardian, and symbol of unbreakable spirit. Whenever a planet faced danger, the people would say, "May the Deathworlders watch over us." In one of the final archives of the Galactic Council, a historian recorded the story of the first human-Varelian alliance. She ended her report with these words: "They were born on a world where everything tried to kill them. Storms, beasts, disease, even each other. But from that world came the strongest hearts the galaxy has ever known. They did not fight because they loved war. They fought because they loved peace more than life itself. And so the legend lived on. Even in distant corners of the galaxy, far beyond where humans first traveled, people told stories around campfires about the Deathworlders, the fierce, kind beings from a blue planet who had once appeared when all hope was lost. They said that if you looked up at the night sky and listened carefully, you could still hear the echo of a promise made long ago. Earth doesn't surrender. Valora Prime became a symbol of hope, a reminder that peace built on sacrifice endures longer than empires built on fear. The Varelians kept their skies open, waiting for the day when the humans might return again, not as warriors this time, but as friends visiting a home they helped save, somewhere deep in the galaxy. A new generation of humans trained under the same motto their ancestors lived by. In the heart of darkness, we bring the light. They carried that spirit forward, ensuring that whenever injustice rose again, someone somewhere would stand up and fight for peace, just like the Deathworlders once did. And as long as the stars shone above Valora Prime, the world that had once been filled with fear remained free. The humans had left their mark, not in destruction but in hope. The galaxy had learned one eternal truth: even the harshest world could give birth to the greatest protectors. And so the legend of the Deathworlders, the saviors who came when peace itself was dying, lived forever, whispered across time, glowing as bright as the stars they once fought beneath.